Manolo, and thank you everyone. I'm very excited to be here with two friends of mine that very much inspire a lot of the work that we've done. They're incredible pioneers in the field, and sometimes I think it's nice to talk about the work that we do, but we always try to bring in new voices and new experiences and just a thoughtful reflection of what is possible, right? In these times of turbulence and politics, and we really want to ground the conversation in, given our collective privilege in this room, what is actually possible, what is actually something that we can do, that we can leave behind, a legacy for our future generations that brings us joy and possibility. So this is within the midst of a very turbulent moment that will continue, and it will get challenging every day even more. We need to be grounded in possibility, grounded in connection, and I think grounded in joy. So hopefully we can transmit both the necessity, the urgency, but mostly the possibility and the joy. So given that, I thought it was a really wonderful opportunity to speak to you too. Thank you for spending time with us today. And I wanted to start back in memory lane, 2000. Charly and Lisa have been pioneers in the field of what is now called impact investing. I don't know what it was called then. It was barely coined when you started the work. That's like, is that right? It's a sound. Oh, okay. That was gonna get very mysterious. So I think the term impact investing, as we know it today, was coined in 2007 in Rockefeller Bellagio retreat meeting, and you guys were already doing the work, you were already thinking about it. And so just, you know, as maybe share a little bit about where your background comes from and what really made you decide to dedicate the wealth that you had gotten to empowering social entrepreneurs, and what has constantly had you question traditional philanthropy, traditional forms? You're always pushing the envelope. Until today, they've been pushing the envelope forever. And I went to dinner last night with them, and they're just thinking about the next thing. And I'm like, where do you get the energy? So I also want that question answered, if possible. So.
But you said
Yeah, the secret to success is to marry a younger man. They keep you active. So the question is a little bit about our background and how contextually that brought us to where we are here.
Yeah, like how did you decide, okay, the structures are not there of what we're looking for. It's not like you could have shifted talk to your wealth manager at the time. We're talking 2007, 10.
Right.
You couldn't just do what you can do today. Like, oh, I want to invest in this and that, and there's a whole portfolio. It wasn't there, and you decided to build it.
Yeah, so it actually starts way back,
okay.
But I won't give all the details. I'm from Hawaii originally. My father, he's passed away, Hawaiian, so I grew up in a family that was mixed. My mother was from the east coast of the US, and my father from Hawaii. And I want to take a moment just to pause. And just a big mahalo to Mexico for right now, for what Mexico is doing, saying, and support, how you guys are supporting us with messaging against the current tyranny that we are living day in and day out. And it feels so good to be here. So I just wanted to say mahalo from my heart for that, yeah? Back to Hawaii. we grew up a struggling small business. We had a healthcare business, family business. And I had my first experience with a bank because I worked for my dad. And the state of Hawaii owed my father over $1 million and had not paid the company for over a year. He went to the bank and asked for a loan against that so he could make payroll, and the bank said no. And that burned in me for a long time, and I went to school, started my career, but I never forgot it. And I had my own small business, and I was very determined to be financially savvy, that I could basically be on the winning side of the financial argument. And so then life introduced me to Charly at the airport in Honolulu. He was 17 and I was 19. Serendipity. And I made the decision 8 years after we met to marry him. It took us back to the West Coast because I couldn't be employed in Austria because it was, as an outsider, it was very difficult to continue my career. So we came back to the West Coast and started to work in Silicon Valley. Little did we know that would have a transformative effect on our economics. So in 1999, I had my own business again, but this time I was serving the tech industry, a lot of startups, and one of the, and I would get referred by landlords, and I was referred to the Community Foundation Silicon Valley. They needed someone to help them with their facility needs. And it was in that conversation with Peter Hero, who was a then ED, that I began to have conversations around using capital for things other than making us wealthy or people more wealthy. And he actually gifted the structure of our foundation. He paid for the legal services to put it together with the note saying, you don't want to do a donor-advised fund, you want your own foundation because you're strong enough to lead it and do amazing things. So he knew that we could do something very purposeful with it. And so, what I bring into that is I brought this desire to transform, using philanthropy, using our capital to transform businesses, small and medium businesses, if we could. And that, to me, has informed the work that we've done in the impact markets globally and locally.
Wonderful. So I am the Austrian in our relationship, European, and was really lucky. Well, I was pretty incompatible with my dad and had to look for an exit strategy when I was 14 to escape that, that corset, which I have now on again, but for different reasons, and decided to apply for American Field Service stipend, AFS, and they took me and brought me over to Maui, Hawaii in 1974-75. And the most important thing that happened there is not surfing or smoking pot, it's actually meeting Lisa. And we have been, in a relationship ever since. We just had our 43rd anniversary and the 50th that we got to know each other. So half a century. Wow. So I'm a technologist. I have a PhD in computer science, and that brought us also to Silicon Valley, not just the vicinity of being closest to Hawaii, but also to do cool technology things, which I was privileged to do in 3 tech startups, and all 3 of them spectacularly successful. And that enabled me to step off the Silicon Valley train when I was 45. Most men are not able to do that because they confuse the reasons why they were so successful between their own brilliance and having luck. And I never had any doubt that luck played a big role in us being commercially successful. But then we asked the question, Lisa and I asked the question to each other, what is the meaning of that wealth that came our way? And that's when either your partnership falls apart because one person wants the private jet thing and the other person wants to self-actualize meditating and yoga. It's not compatible. But we were on the same page. We were clear that the wealth that came our way comes with responsibility to do something meaningful for humanity and the planet, which now is called impact investing. And we were also both, and so for us it was not an option to just use it for ourselves. It was never on the table. And the second, I think, motivator for both of us was that we are both systems thinkers. Lisa's an architect, I am a computer scientist, and we saw that the systems that humanity invented, particularly the financial system and the philanthropy system and the economic system, is not serving humanity anymore, but just the rich and the super rich. And we set out to change that.
Thank you. And also you can jump in with questions. This is more of a conversation. But so you have been the first backers and movers of quite a few things, right? Starting with backing Sonnen Capital, which is one of the first asset managers doing impact investing. Knowing Raul, he was in Bank of America, right, back then, doing traditional investments, and you were poking him, like, we want something different. Where are you going to get it? How are you going to find it? So, can you share a little bit about that story? Walk us through the decision about your insistence to not do what the traditional, I guess a lot of people told you, you're going to lose everything, you're crazy, don't do it. I can imagine, I'm supposing, because I've been told that a few times.
So this is where luck plays a role.
Okay.
And also, I think when you're in Silicon Valley, you see so many things happen that, juxtapositions of people to capital that are very serendipitously there. It wouldn't happen in any other place in the world. I mean, I watched people, I worked at Apple Computer. I watched some young people there leave Apple, go with a startup, people cycled out, and here's somebody, who is making maybe $40,000 a year. He gets an upside, he became a millionaire overnight, and this was happening all the time, and you're living in an environment like that's a little bit crazy. But it gives you a lot of courage. So when we left Silicon Valley, the thing we did take with us is the willingness to take risk, more risk than other folks would take. But also, we were not either of us from a financial background per se. We didn't have an investment portfolio. We didn't even know what that word was, what a portfolio was. Charlie probably knew a little bit more because he'd been taking some courses. But we were pretty tabula rasa, which gave us there were no brakes on anything that we could think up. So we pretty much invented every step of the way, and that's why today when we look back and we meet people out in the field, they'll say, oh, I'm invested in this, that, and the other thing. I'll give you one example, impact assets. How many of you, some of you in the room know about impact assets in the US? 3 people came to our house and said, we want to basically start this new thing, and we're looking for someone to give us seed funding to do it, and it's going to be called impact assets. So we wrote them a check. It was like, why would we not do that? We were doing a lot of check writing in the early days. Well, today it's a $6 billion fund. And guess how big our investment was? It's really big, $25,000. So talk about leverage, right? So it's a little bit like gambling in the sense that when you have that kind of success and impact, it just drives you to want to do more, and because every step of the way we're rethinking structures and not looking at status quo, we got very emboldened to do that. And that's been the style that we continue doing, which is what you saw last night at the table.
Yes.
And maybe, Tania, be more specific about what we don't like about the classical philanthropic system. It actually creates more dependencies and more corruption and doesn't serve in partnership the people that need the help. And so it's a handout, it's not a partnership, and it's not in the right relationship. When we worked in Sri Lanka, at the time of the tsunami, billions of dollars went into philanthropy to help Sri Lankans, and almost nothing came to the fisher villages that we worked in, right? And that cemented our view that classical philanthropy, with the exception of doing disaster relief and other things, is not really the right model. And when we looked at the investment side, the the pure maximization of profits at the expense of environmental and social externalities did not speak to us. We couldn't support a model like this. And there's tendencies today, again, to bifurcate that and say it's either philanthropy or investments. We don't believe in that. We do a lot of things in between, and we'll talk about some of that. But those are the systemic design mistakes that go at the heart of these systems, that unless we change it, we cannot expect a different outcome. If it's cheaper and more profitable to extract oil and coal and burn it than to leave it in the ground, people will do it because the incorporation models encourage that behavior. So what we try to do is go deeper in seeing where the root causes are of these breakdowns, and then figure out if there's any leverage that we can have on that level.
Yeah, and I think, the role of philanthropy to me has a pretty useful, again, we can have a discussion about that, but I think it can be quite catalytic at the beginning, right? And there is a use to support catalytic projects that don't have a model for capital return. But I think now we have the ability to do blended finance, to work together between philanthropic organizations, for-profit organizations. It's a very evolved world from when you started it, right? It's a whole different ballgame. And that has happened, just for reference, because we tend to maybe be impatient, this is not moving fast enough. This has happened in 20 years, right? It's quite fast, from the time where you're okay, this doesn't even exist, there's no language for it, we need to invent it, to now where you can actually do blended finance. It's a big progress. So I just want to name that because you've been part of that ride since the very beginning, no? And for maybe groups that are understanding, and this is always a big question, and I would love your perspective because I've never gotten the same answer, but how do you understand the idea of, in the investment space, the idea of returns? How do you understand financial returns? What are they there for in your case? And what do you see, what advice could you say to people that don't have clarity on this? It's a very sort of, I think, mysterious thing. You can fall back into saying, oh, that's the market, and so we'll just fall back into the market, and that sounds roughly okay, without really understanding what the market is actually doing to get those returns, right? And so I think a lot of the work is uncovering, okay, that's the market, but what is the market doing to get that money back? And so how do you understand the relationship to this? I don't know if you can comment on that.
You have it. So what we do runs at a cross current to the market. And so this has been a long discussion that do you compare impact investments to market rates, and what are market rates tied to, and are they even appropriate as a measure? And the answer is no, they're not appropriate. So by the way, we have 4 entities we invest out of, and they all have different types of constraints and needs, right, in terms of capital and capital return. So we're experimenting across those structures, and these are things, I don't know if you have it here, like a CRT, we have the foundation, we have our personal trust, so the different building blocks. So the returns, we have what we call an appropriate return. So we look first at the impact. We don't even look at the return. First at the impact, does that fit into our broader strategic desire on impact? If the answer is yes, is it scalable? How scalable is it? We don't want wildly scalable, we want appropriately scalable. So we're looking at all these things first. And then we look at the financial part of it to decide, okay, what would be the appropriate return here? What would be a blended return that the company's going to benefit, the community's going to benefit, we're going to benefit, whatever that magic is. So any individual investment is going to have a different rubric. And then there's a composite rubric for the portfolio. So it's not it's not an easy black-white answer.
And
I think there's so many myths out there with respect to financial return and impact investing that we should really talk about it explicitly. And so most people want to have what they call market rate returns and deep impact, right? And that's only possible in a few scenarios. One is, impact investing is usually around environmental and or social returns, right? And on the environmental side, if impact investors are a little bit ahead of the curve and invest in something that's going to be internalized into the markets, then they can expect outsized financial returns for these types of investments. The other type of investment where you can make what they call market rate returns and impact is if the impact investing opportunity is based on technology. Because if it's based on technology, then the scale is usually built into it that would allow equity investors to take an appropriate exit. If you don't have that scale, you should not even invest in equity into these companies because it doesn't work from an exit perspective. Many impact investments are therefore not equity investments, but debt investments. And there you can have, subsidized debt or non-subsidized debt. And subsidized debt, we don't like that terminology either, because if they don't have the cash flow yet in order to pay you a decent return on the loan that you give, maybe you structure it differently in order to enable the loan to be paid back with the appropriate financial return over time. And so you see, it's a nuanced discussion that one doesn't fit all, and blends come in. And then, another dirty little secret of impact investing is the markets do not understand social injustice. The markets do not understand yet inequality on a fundamental level. The poorness where there is no market. Tell me anybody, what is a market rate return for the bottom of the pyramid? There is no market. And so what do you expect then to return? You can't expect equity returns if you serve that part of the population with services or products that they are not equipped to pay fully loaded cost of goods or something else. And so those are the underlying pinnings, right, of how the system works. And if you go in naively, and it's a holy cow for institutional capital, if you say we need to move beyond market rate returns, they don't want to talk to you anymore because their lawyers interpret fiduciary responsibility wrongly in providing market rate returns only. And the Biden, Obama too tried to change that in the US. Of course, the current administration reversed that to way back, and we need to wait for the next administration to change that. So the environment is not that easy for impact investors, particularly if you care about DEI. In the US, there's a big backlash happening. In Europe, not that much, but that's the environment that we're in. And let's move beyond the black and whiteness of just philanthropy and market rate returns and have a deeper conversation about appropriate returns in the context of impact, risk, and return that needs to be internalized into the modern portfolio theory, which they don't do right now.
Yeah. And part of the question that I have is, you had the option, number one, of just investing traditionally. You decided to go and experiment and try new things. You were quite successful at that. But then not only did you say, okay, fantastic, we're getting returns, we set out, we're getting the impact we want, but then we also have to inspire others, and we have to make a community of investors that are like-minded. It wasn't only about your portfolio. There's been so much energy that you've put into bringing investors alongside to discuss, to learn, to question. Nobody here has the actual answer, and so building that capacity to discuss and argue is a muscle that you've been building over the years in Tonic and now in Twist. So I don't know if you can comment, where did you get the energy to do that, and what made you do that? Why not sit in Big Sur alone or Hawaii? It's beautiful.
Well, it kind of lies with our kids. We have two kids. They're adults now. One's 40 and one's 42. And they were in middle school when we had this financial upside, and they were really embarrassed because of the company Charly was in. They published, at those days, they published who the officers were, how many shares they were exercising, and we had gifted shares to the kids, never thinking that, you're doing it, maybe it's going to be something, maybe not, but guess whose names show up in the newspaper? Our kids. So all of a sudden at school, other kids are saying, how come your name's in the newspaper and why do you have so much money, right? So a lot of shame. So we had to work through that as a family. I'm almost forgetting the question now, but this is a part to the answer. So the question had to do with the organization. So yes, but what was happening was we worked it through with the family. We changed the name of the foundation. It had our name on it. It now has a Latin name on it. And we had a philanthropic advisor, and he was the one who said to us, if you really want to have impact, you need to put your name on the work you're doing, and you need to publish it. So we started to tell our story very transparently, good, bad, and indifferent, what we were doing. And it was Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, and they would broadcast that to their global network. There were other families out in the world who were having the same conversations with their kids and wanting to do it differently, were feeling that they had a kuleana or a responsibility to community, but were having advisors whose whole task was to just maximize return. And so while I would love to think that we kind of ran the show, I would say RPA had the vision that this could happen. They could see the need. They just needed someone to put a stake in the ground so that families would have a gathering point and enter into a conversation. And that's really how Tonic began its work. We did it both locally. We had a group of people in Silicon Valley who were interested in our work. But the global movement definitely was spearheaded, I think, by RPA's actions.
So for me, the answer to your question lies in my and our worldview and the consequences of that worldview. So my worldview and many others are that humanity is in this polycrisis because we forgot what humanity actually is. And a lot of the indigenous communities have not forgotten that. And that's, we are part of nature, we are part of the universe, we are part of the magic that is beyond our brains and our feelings. And we reflected a lot about why we are not able to change these systems, particularly the economic and the financial system that doesn't serve us anymore. And because we know the principles of circularity, of resiliency, of social justice, of regionality, and yet we choose not to apply them. And so we keep asking, why is that the case? And the answer to that question, in my opinion, is a lack of consciousness and awareness of humanity on that level. So if that's what you believe in, and I believe in that, I don't expect you to believe in that, but then you say, well, what can I contribute to elevate the level of consciousness and awareness of humanity? Where's the leverage points to do that? And the answer to that question is inside yourself. So if you can only show up with clarity and with inner peace and joy, which you started out with, if you actually know who you are on that level and what your purpose in life is on that level. And our purpose, my purpose, is to make a difference in elevating that consciousness by being present, by being here, by contributing on many different levels, creating out of these islands of coherence, archipelagos of coherence that are driven by human connectivity as opposed to transactions, on that level, the mycelium. Oh, that was this morning with the clavifrome, yeah, the mycelium of humanity, yeah. So I can only do this because at my age I do mindfulness practices, so I can show up wherever I show up with clarity and purpose.
Yeah.
Just to pick up on some of the things that you mentioned. There was a lot there, on the islands of coherence that we've been talking about, and just to share the concept, one of the basic precepts that a lot of, I guess, scientists, sociologists, understanding what we're facing in the future, where we see hope is in having groups that cohere, that connect to a vision, and that hold that vision together in very turbulent times that will come. I'll talk about that, unfortunately, in a little bit. So I think what you were alluding to, Charly, is how can we build that connectivity, that trust amongst each other, where we say, we share, as you said, RPA saw that connection. No, there's people that share the same values, they sort of want the same thing, and then now let's connect, let's learn from each other. And so this is a muscle that you've gotten quite strong at, right? And now Tonic Network has grown to 250 members. There's a gathering in Mérida happening, what? Oh, 500. 500 members. There's a gathering in Mérida happening in 2 or 3 days. People from all over the world coming together to really reflect on what is next, what is it ours to do? And I think this question of what is it ours to do is so relevant because we can sit in frustration looking at the world's politics and disasters, or we can get together and build trust and work together. And so can you speak a little bit about this new iteration that you're working on now that we're members of called Twist? Why did you join Twist, come up with Twist? Because even if RPA told you, oh, it's a good idea that you get people together, the way you show up makes a difference, right? You could have just shown up and just be passive and like, oh yeah, I like those guys, they're nice, you know, I agree, but not the passion that you put into making it happen, which I've experienced when I've met you, right? You're always there, you're always pushing, bringing people to the conversation. So can you share about why Twist if you had already done Tonic, 500 members? Why is that not enough?
Well, so this is not about Tonic, because I think Tonic has evolved too beyond the original concept around focusing on impact investing. What we've learned over the arc of the last 25 years is that impact investing is a function within the system. It's not enough by itself. And this is where the catalytic capital, blended capital, all these other tools came into play that we need to, if we cherry pick, like the traditional markets cherry pick the winners, there's a lot of losers on the landscape. What if we, instead of just picking winners, we pick a carefully curated set of levers in a system and look at what investment capital, poly capital, needs to go into each of those places. What's our kuleana, our responsibility in the system, not just in the individual enterprise or the individual fund. And when you flip the script that way, you start to see way more possibilities on how you can use your networks. You can use your everything but your capital sometimes. Sometimes we go in and we don't invest any money, but we invest our network, our expertise, and we can have transformative effect doing that. And once it opened up that we could bring our full selves to this task, it became a very different exercise. And the biggest thing, Charly shared this early, we read a book together and there was a quote in there, do not be attached to the outcome, right? And that also freed us up from measuring our own performance and being unwilling to deviate if it looked like we're taking too much risk. So,
you know, about 7 years ago, I and many others saw the ESG train coming right into the impact space. And ESG, for those of you who don't know about it, it's environmental, social and governance criteria, which is just a risk mitigation measurement for the existing financial system. It has nothing to do with a new system. It has nothing to do with changing any systems. And so they used it to confuse things, because impact investing is to specifically invest for net positive impact, versus ESG is to leave things out and to to invest in the best, in the best, worst things. And I thought, well, there's ESG and impact, and now that's differentiated, but there's also impact and deep impact. And I coined deep impact 7 years ago, keying off RNNA's terminology of deep ecology. And he wrote an article in 1972 describing deep ecology as non-anthropocentric, non-human-centric. And that spoke to me, and it speaks to us, because we think of deep impact investments as beyond our own ego, beyond our own generation. It is soul-based, right? It's not based on human centricity in the universe. And the second criteria, I said, in order to qualify for deep impact, is it has to be systemic in nature. And so those two differentiators, the level of awareness that you bring to it, the attention and the intention without attaching to the outcome, together with the awareness of the systems change, is what we think is needed to do that. And that was the motivation to co-create Twist at the time, with that purpose of inner and outer mindset shift in yourself, mindset shift in the organizations that we influence or work in, a mindset shift of general populations, you know, to elevate that level of awareness and consciousness, to go back to the responsibility. Lisa has mentioned kuleana. It's a Hawaiian word of taking responsibility to be human, right? And you can talk about it more, but he didn't explain it. And that's, you know, we feel that. And so that was, you know, and since nobody else was doing it, if we see that somebody else is doing it, we attach to that, right? We don't want to create new things unless they need to be created at the time that they are needed. And 8-10 years ago, it was too early. We thought about these things, but the time was not right yet. And 4 years ago, it was right.
Thank you.
And so just real quick, so just like RPA and just like this emergence globally of families stepping up saying, we want to do something different, Twist, the timing was that examples were happening in communities around the world where people were connecting the dots, that this is not an individual siloed exercise, but we need to have a collective action if we're going to solve for food access, if we're going to solve for affordable housing, you know, pick a thematic in the social sector. And that was the emergence of these case studies that Twist then created a home to attract that community that global community of people who are doing this work to come together to have a peer-to-peer exchange. So that's why Twist came together.
And just to finish off, and I want to turn it to anyone that wants to ask a question, please raise your hands. But just in terms of your energy level, of doing all this work, of showing up, of being in so many groups and still saying, I'm going to make the time of my day, when you clearly don't need to, right, make the time in your day for this. Why do you keep doing it? What is it? What is the attraction of being in these spaces, of visiting the entrepreneurs? What is it that keeps you coming?
For me, it's really personal. When I left Hawaii, which I didn't ever want to leave, but I mean, how can you say no to that? I had an opportunity to go back home. I was invited back when the school that I went to learned of the work we were doing. And what I found when I went back and built the Hawaii Investment Ready program, working with Native Hawaiians and Kama'aina, these are people born and raised in Hawaii but not Native, helping them to transform their business outcomes with nonprofits and for-profits. When I started the work, it was a few years it was tough because I felt like I wasn't of that anymore. I felt foreign in my own place of home. And it took me a while to get back on board that this is my community. And one day, a woman by the name of Kaui Saidudua from the island of Molokai, Native Hawaiian speaker, was in our cohort, and she was doing a presentation, and all of a sudden, I heard my grandmother, who had been dead since since 1972, actually. I heard her voice in Kawi Saidudwa's presentation, because there's a certain inflection in the English, spoken English, that has the Hawaiian. My grandmother spoke Hawaiian, and in that moment, I was home. So it's very personal for me.
Nice. Well, then I also make it personal. So I had to prepare for dying about 6 and a half years ago, with a weird kind of cancer that doesn't allow most people to survive it, and so I had to prepare for detaching from my own life, and that during those months I wrote my personal website, I wrote my lymphoma manifesto. I went deeper in exploring who I really am, discovering that I don't have a bucket list to sign off before I go on to whatever is beyond our lives here, and worked on the purpose of my life became even clearer than it was before. And so for me, it's not a choice anymore. That's who I am, and it's not what I think I have to do, but who I am, and therefore I do it.
I don't know if anyone wants to have a question for Lisa or for Charly, anything that you want to know.
Can I do a shout out?
Yes.
To Maria Matilda, who I got to speak to this morning, who also came to what she does, her work, in the same way, a very personal connection from her family. I just wanted to say that was a very meaningful conversation. And it's these kind of exchanges that don't happen elsewhere in the world, other than in convenings like this, where we all share this deep reason that we're here, and when we can articulate it with one another, it fills my cup. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Well, it's been lovely to listen to your stories, and I just want to know how the impact investment communities are moving right now with all this, with all this conversation of polarities going on in the world. So, those who have it in their sense of just being in the world, I bet, are going deeper, but how about the rest? The ones that are just entering into the conversation. Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? How's it moving?
I think it depends a little bit on the context. So, I go to Europe 3 times a year, so I sense and feel what's going on in Europe, so I can talk about that. In the US, I would not trust myself to say what's going on here, because we're not here enough. In Europe, it's amazing what's going on many different levels. In my opinion, they have caved in to the new king in Washington, D.C., both on the NATO side and the EU side, which was disappointing for me as a European. They, in my opinion, went away from their stated values to support, building weapons as their main industry. And many Europeans call that impact investing. I challenge them and say, you stood for peace before, what happened, And it's not a simple discussion, because they feel betrayed by the king in DC and are traumatized right now because of this. So a very complex type of discussion, and they're trying to hold on to the status quo without accepting leadership from the global south. And in my opinion, the poly crisis will be solved by the global south, because Europe is too old, if you wish, and too not innovative enough anymore, and wants to just protect what they have. The US has gone off the rails a little bit. We all hope that they will come back, and if they do come back, they will be a force to be reckoned with, as the Americans always are, because if they reinvent themselves as they have done before, which I really hope, then we can expect big things out of there. And then, of course, there's China, and there is still, in China, I'm not a China expert, but I know a lot of people who work there, where it's still philanthropy and maximizing it to the most part, and not really going in between. I had hoped that the Europeans would develop the third pillar within the global context, but they're losing out on that, supporting the weapons industry. And if you want to make returns these days, the dirty little secret is you have to invest in weapons and AI, right? Because that's where you make money. We could never invest in pure speculation because that's not compatible with our values, and so we can't possibly invest in the bitcoins, which was good in the last 3 months anyway. But just saying, right? If it's not related to the real economy, then that's not compatible. So in any case, it's a long-winded answer, but the answer is depending on the context. Now, tonic, twist, are global communities where we try to transcend the geopolitical straitjackets that our own societies put around us, depending on where we live, and rediscover the humanity of connectivity between everybody who cares about the future of humanity. And that's where I see the connectivity deepen within the regions and outside the regions, fortunately. But it's a small movement. It shrunk, and we need to rebuild it, but with deeper purposes, with deeper meaning, and going beyond the holy cows that we have not touched in the last iteration of impact investing.
I think we're seeing a real wake-up at a state level, despite the noise, where states, particularly the blue states, are fortifying themselves. Philanthropy has shifted where they're cutting a lot of programs, aid programs, so philanthropy is stepping up. A lot of spend downs of foundations that we're seeing in the U.S. I would say, it started with COVID. That was the first rallying call that we had the opportunity to do collective action as a community between the financial markets, philanthropy, and the private sector. And so we built that muscle then, and now in the new environment, it's, the impact is slightly different, but the net impact at the local level is the same, right? The increase in poverty, lack of access to healthcare, and so forth. And so what we're seeing is the systems that were built then are being lifted back up again and being put into force at a state level. So in terms of the impact investing markets, because we're the bioregional, so localized, community level investment is now out there on the forefront, and I think you're doing that, I know you're doing that, and we're doing that too.
Yeah, I mean, just a comment on that question. I think, like to Charly's point, there's gonna be more and more turbulent times in our future. There is zero doubt. So this idea of islands of coherence, of groups that can go deeper, when humanity is in desperate need, which it will be in desperate need, to turn to, we were very distracted with politics, spending all our energy and time in individuals, crazy individuals, and we missed the boat, we missed the opportunity to really look at what matters the most in sustaining life in the planet. This is where I think communities like ours and global communities like the ones they've created can shed light and possibility. So this is why for us it's an absolute joy and privilege to keep on going, to keep on speaking, to keep on connecting, to keep on building trust, that we can really, that is the legacy that we can bring to the future. That's it. We can't do more than that. We can't control global politics, but we can shed light, regenerate landscapes, and put our feet on the ground for others that are ready to do it. And what has happened is that I think a lot of media has silenced around impact investing, it has become silent. A lot of corporates have silenced, but they are still doing the work because they know they don't have an option anymore. So if you talk to large corporate groups, sustainability is now at the core of their mission. It hasn't left. They just don't speak about it because of the geopolitics. And I think it's the same with families that are doubling down, tripling down in saying it's either us or no one, right? So I think we're also seeing that, and we have hope in that, to be honest, because it's a growing number of families all over the world that really want to bet on this. It's a growing generation that really wants to bet on this, and that's really our hope. So yeah, just on my... Anyone?
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience. It's an honor to be with OGs of the impact investment world and hearing like from all of your experience and seeing how the ecosystem has transformed. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the challenges of the space right now. I see a disconnect between what we're trying to do and the way we're doing it. I think the mention of the Global South and indigenous peoples, and I'm not saying you, but in general in the sector, has been used as a way of including it, but I see we're falling short in transitioning power, wealth, and leadership to the Global South. And I think it's a challenge that only even to mention it, like if you go to spaces like FLEA or other impact investment conferences, you'll hear some people that really understand this, but most of it, I think, are still looking for return first, not really committed with impact. So just wondering, what is your vision of those challenges, where there are right now? Like, what do we need to continue doing to change those minds? But also, how do we create bigger alliances? And I have a different perspective on philanthropy, not only because I work in philanthropy, because we do impact investment as well, but more like what is not allowing others to join impact investors and vice versa? What is not allowing impact investors to join others?
Just one small point. If you're only about changing minds, that's not going to work. There's a lot of study on that, it's really difficult to change minds, but you can change hearts. And I think that's the work that we're doing, is that we're doing this in a different way. We're not putting our cerebral mind, intellect forward first. We're putting our heart-centered vision and of what the world could be, and investing that intentionality in the work that we're doing. With respect to, Charlie's getting really nervous, so I'll let him have the mic, but then I'll put a coda on it when you're done.
No. I'm antsy because of my arm, mostly. Yeah, so. What we are seeing, of family offices that want to go deeper is they carve out part of their family office assets in order to experiment with deeper impact, where they detach from competitive financial returns. So they say, for this amount of capital, I go deep and I don't hold you accountable for meeting whatever benchmarks I usually judge you on. And that gives them the freedom to have a sandbox, to play with other like-minded people, where maximizing profits is off the table. And maybe you want to box it in and say you don't want to lose everything. There's something in between, and which we do. And I think we see more and more people who have the desire to do that and say, I don't need all the capital for myself. I am going to be willing to risk part of it to go deeper on the social side, to go deeper on whatever cause resonates with you. And I think that is a very, very valid strategy that Lisa and I are have deployed as well, where with our foundation we go very deep and are willing to lose some money, in order to showcase cases and scale them up later or integrate them into the market. And for the CRTs that we live off, we're not going that deep because we want to maintain sort of the power to pay ourselves for the rest of our lives, right? And so depending on the horizon that you have and the desire of deep impact, you can combine these two without betting the farm and without becoming poor, which, how much is enough is a difficult question for most family offices, and that is part of the answer, is you can carve out something that you don't need to enjoy surfing and to enjoy whatever you do, and do it that way. Sorry about my answerness.
Yeah. So I just was on a call with a family office in Spain, and they've done Financial First with Impact, and they had a family meeting, and they said, actually, they want to flip it. They want to do Impact first and financial second. There is also, I was in another call recently, just to give a flavor of the conversation going on, with someone from South Africa who actually works in the UK. She's doing a project for also another global organization of wealthy folks. Tonic is also doing a very similar project, apparently. We didn't know it. We were doing it in parallel and not knowing that each was doing it. And this was, the Tonic investment community is stepping up and has said, the advisories are not giving us what we need. We're willing to take a haircut. We want more services. And so this work started last year in Los Angeles, and we now have this manifesto that's going to go out to the market a little bit later. It's going to, an RFP that's going to spell very clearly, and it represents about 25 billion in assets. These are the services we want an advisory to help us with. We're looking for someone who's going to put it all together, and if we can't have it all together, can we have a quarterback who's going to get best of breed and put something together for us, so that because we are impact first and we want to be served. This other group of wealth was doing the same thing, had done interviews also with their members, and when we looked at their body of work and ours, we're going to share notes. We're going to actually improve our RFP, they're going to improve their RFP. So this is an emergence of wealth holders right now that are actually wanting to dig deeper, according, just as Charly pointed out, not go away from impact investing.
Just to translate, because there was a lot of technical language in there, what I think Lisa was talking about is families that want to push a new subset of financial advisors and asset managers with deep impact. There's not many in the world, right? And there's a lot of capital. So if you say, I have $25 billion to spend in deep impact, 25 billion, yeah? It's hard to do, right? There's not a lot of asset managers that say, I can do that. So I think there's also the emergence of, with families getting together and sharing values and saying, we want to push for a new subset of managers that really take us seriously and that don't, when it's cool to do impact investing, they do it, and then when it's not, they go back to oil and gas. There's a lot of that happening, right? A lot of managers that are moving conveniently in the space, and I think it's fantastic that we can push for new ones to emerge that are really true to the values. So thank you so much for being here today with us. And sorry, Renee, go for it.
Lisa, you said something very interesting early on, which is when you look at investments, you want it to be scalable, but not wildly scalable. And that's exactly the opposite of what a lot of impact investors want. And here I'm thinking about some of the large US private foundations out there. All they want to do is things that are wildly scalable, and they're going to measure the outcome. And they want market rate returns because they said, there are two great reasons that I've heard. One is we want to make sure our grandchildren will have the ability to do philanthropy, which is why our foundation needs to continue to last longer. And the other one is if it's not market rate, it's hard to move Wall Street and other banks to invest in this. So talking about trying to change not their minds, but their heart, wondering if you and Charly have been thinking about how to change the hearts of these, like of the principles of the private foundations.
It is difficult to associate big corporations with consciousness and awareness, because private companies do, based on the families that own that. They are the consciousness behind private capital, and it's very tightly coupled. We have created a system where the management of international publicly held companies are not held accountable to anything, and certainly not to impact. And so while there are conscious people running these, they are usually driven by the systemic context that they're in and confusing their humanity with that system. To give you an example, when I saw most of the Silicon Valley billionaires and CEOs travel east to the new king and offer their condolences, that would be different, but they're supporting him, it was usually, I wouldn't say they're bad people, but they're driven by, take Apple. Apple is a $1 trillion company to create 10% growth. If their supply chain crashes because of a tariff on the iPhones, that's why that's going on, right? And we can say, well, Tim shouldn't do that because if he had consciousness, then he shouldn't do that. But he cannot have it both ways. Either he has to leave Apple in order to do conscious work, or he stays there and he's not able to do that, or he would be fired. That's the choice. And so unless we change the incorporation model, number one, that would enable then the management of these big corporations. Lisa mentioned that I was an officer of a publicly held company, and all of my transactions were made public in order to avoid, green, money laundering and what have you. But unless we change that, we cannot expect them to do different. So it's deep systemic issues that we're fighting with the big mining companies that go way beyond the consciousness of individual mining managers in these companies, right? And there's organizations working with the middle management and the senior management of publicly held companies as well. And one time I got to similar analogy, I got to speak to 20 hedge fund managers, all men, of course, and started out talking about hedging as opposed to consciousness. But then 3 weeks later, one of them changed jobs because he couldn't stand anymore to be part of that industry, right? But the only escape is to get outside of that industry if you're in a really, really, really dirty industry. And you have a deep consciousness that doesn't allow you to do that. Temporary trade-offs are fine. You can learn something somewhere and then move on.
I have a good story, real quick. On the airplane coming here, I sat next to a woman, and she was busy working, and we started to talk, and I said, oh, who do you work for? BlackRock. And I said, so what is your impact strategy at BlackRock? And she says, to double down on profit. And I said, so is that your ideal dream job? And she said, absolutely not. She says, my dream job would be, I want to be an interior designer so that I can give people joy and not just bill them for fees.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here with us today and spending time sharing your story. I hope it was inspiring, or you learned something or brought thoughts to our journey. And once again, I think the idea is that we really try to listen to each other. It's always hard to do these presentation formats. We're always curious what is on the other side, what is going through your minds. So hopefully we can share that during lunch, we can share that during the breaks.